I'm Leela Singh, your podcast host, and I'd like to welcome you to the My Brand HQ podcast, all things personal branding for career acceleration. This podcast is for talented, ambitious career professionals like you who are wanting to be perceived as a thought leader, to be top of mind to those that matter, and to make an impact and stand out, be that in your team, your organization, or your industry, and to be inspired by other successful leaders. I will be interviewing high-achieving career professionals who have carved out a successful career in their field and are open to sharing their career journey, their challenges, their learnings and insights with you, someone who is looking to establish your personal brand and accelerate your career. Through my personal branding and coaching practice, I enable career professionals primarily in the technology industry to earn more money, to increase their salary. In fact, I spoke to all of my past clients that I've worked with over several years and learned that actually overall, they've received an average of 47% increase in their package. Would that be a great place to be? They've also all achieved at least one, if not more, promotions or moved on to a higher level in their career at another organization. And they're looking to advance their career while showing up as the best version of themselves. If this sounds like you, then do reach out to me and let's have a chat. And why do I do this? Well, during my corporate career spanning 25 years, I quickly realized that hard work alone was not enough to get me to where I wanted to be and the success that I strive for. And my belief is that hard work, coupled with creating and establishing a strong personal brand, can both influence and accelerate your career and get you to where you want to be. In today's episode, I'm speaking with Sukhi Gill. Sukhi is DXC Technologies Vice President, Fellow and Chief Technology Officer for EMEA, where he's responsible for overall technical direction, innovation, and leading the senior client-facing Account Chief Technologists. His role is responsible for directing the engagement of technologists with business leaders who are challenged with digital business transformation. Sukhi has over 31 years of experience in the IT industry, with very large-scale IT services, infrastructure modernization, and application delivery programs. He also has extensive experience across many industry segments, where he can collaborate with organizations to enable them to gain significant business advantage through the strategic deployment of technology and process innovation. Prior to the EMEA CTO role, Sukhi was a Hewlett-Packard Enterprise Fellow, leading on business-led digital transformation initiatives. This was heavily influenced by a sabbatical role for 7 months in 2015 as a CTO and VP for engineering for a Sunnyvale, US startup. In today's episode, Sukhi shares with us a powerful lesson in simplification for technologists engaging with business leaders. That is, I asked you the time, not how the watch is made. Why, as a fellow of both DXC and HPE, Sukhi, a lifelong learner, is also an apprentice. He also shares his fascination for technology from an early age and complex problem solving. And when it comes to business development, how to lead with the problems and fully understand the customer. He also shares why cultivating a diverse network should form part of your day-to-day activity and how it creates invaluable, diverse perspectives. So let's head over and hear what Sukhi has to say. Sukhi, good afternoon and welcome to the My Brand HQ podcast. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to join me today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks, Layla. Really pleased to join you today for this talk.
Likewise, I'm really looking forward to this. I want to dive straight in. And here's the thing, you spent, over 31 years in the IT industry. So I'd love to know more about that. Tell me, what was it that actually took you into a career in tech in the first place? How did you find yourself here?
So it goes way back to early teenage years. My parents actually bought me a BBC B computer. You're probably too young to know about that, but a 32K BBC computer cost £399, fair bit of money for my parents in those days. And that was me persuading them that technology was going to be part of the future. And so prior to O levels and A levels, I was already programming in BASIC. Did computer studies at sort of O level. There wasn't A levels in computer science at that time, but then ended up studying this at university. And unfortunately, had to get a job straight after university for personal reasons, family reasons, and ended up going to the civil service and saying, can I get a job in technology? And they posted me at the Inland Revenue at the Accounts Office in Shipley, which was a big tech centre, but I wasn't really working on the computer side. I ended up working in the collection side. And then, long story short, it took me a while to pivot from actually the operational side of the business of Inland Revenue, collection and taxes, into the IT side, because that's what fascinated me. How are the computers actually being used to make these calculations? And in 1988, I moved to Telford, from Yorkshire to Telford, to work at the accounts office in Shipley. But it was, and listen, I was pretty much blinkered on my view. That's what I wanted to do. I loved technology. My parents would have preferred I'd gone into medicine or law or something. My mum didn't want me to do law. She said, I don't want you to lie for a living. But but medicine was obviously, you know, quite a prestigious profession. But my parents did not understand this computer thing, even though they helped buy me the computer and help me go in. But it's been a passion of mine. If I'd have gone into medicine, I think I still would have been doing technology on the side as a hobby. So I'm really lucky. I work in a job that is probably my hobby, right? I mean, it's what I enjoy doing. After work, if there's such a thing as normal office hours and work, I study technology. I mean, I'll spend the weekend reading, and it no longer is it pure computer science. It's obviously science, technology, engineering. I just have a whole passion for that. I don't read novels as much as I read technical books, right? I'm really trying to understand what's happening in science and technology.
Amazing. So not only did you have the foresight to see that there was a massive future for tech, but also the fascination for it and the enthusiasm, the passion as well. So, and what you just said there about a hobby, you know, we always hear people saying, you know, if you're doing what you love, it's no longer a job, it's a hobby. It's an amazing place to be.
Yes. And I think with that, I was never waiting for somebody to train me. I was proactive in sort of learning things. So I'm sort of self-taught, C++, Visual Basic, shell scripting, Unix, database administration. But most of my career, in the early part of that career, what would typically happen is people say, well, we need to send you formally on a training course. And I'd go, but I actually know all this stuff. So if you're going to send me on a course, then send me on sort of advanced Unix fundamentals or advanced C programming and so on. And that's because I couldn't get enough of the content. The challenge, I would say, in the 80s, 90s was you had to buy these expensive books and learn it from scratch. There wasn't the internet that you have today, where a lot of this stuff is available online. And that's the cool thing now. I mean, so much of this content in Coursera, in open classes, just available. So, you know, there is really no issue with getting hold of the content relatively cheaply, if not free, and actually using that to educate yourself.
Yeah, goodness me. And so in and amongst all of that, then tell me, what is it you enjoy most about it? Because you're obviously passionate about it, but what is it that has you, you know, studying tech, as you say, in your spare time?
So I would say solving complex problems with new and emerging technology is the sort of area I'm at. It doesn't always have to be new, but sometimes, you know, using technology that you may have solved a problem in a different industry and bringing it to a new domain or a new industry really excites me, right? About solving these problems in different ways. And typically where I get involved, these problems are not routine and they're not simple. They're not uncomplicated. They're quite complex. They're complex problems where there isn't an obvious answer, and people ask me to get involved. Some of that is my experience of, having done these projects before. So there was a time where I would get tapped for some of the most complex projects, and I would fight my way through them. And they would take a long time. They weren't like a few months, they could be a couple of years, right? On a very large program where you would want to see the sell and deliver of a large complex program and transformation. But as you come through that, you learn so much. You learn how to manage teams, you know how to do architecture at scale, you learn where to experiment versus where to apply waterfall techniques, and slowly build and scale up, and so on. And so all of these are practically earned stripes, right, that you get from doing work. I have to say, Lila, I do mentor a lot of graduates at the moment, and I do feel there is a desire for some graduates to cut corners and just want to get quickly to the top of the ranks. And I say, look, you don't have the grounding in some of the fundamentals. And I really learned that doing very large, complex programs and being mentored by some of the best. I mean, I have to say, some of the people I worked with, I learned so much from, in terms of, challenging me. I would say that probably, having started in government, I didn't really truly have a business head on me until sort of mid-90s, when somebody said to me, can you redesign this? And once I redesigned it, they said, how much will it cost? And I went, I have no idea. And they went, well, go work it out. Because it's a great design, but unless I know how much it's going to cost, then it doesn't really make any sense, right? And nobody had asked me up to that point. Somebody else would have done that costing. But when they asked me, I went, that's a very valid question. I can't come up with an answer without understanding the, cost implications of this kind of stuff.
Yeah. So a couple of things there then. What I take from that is it's the complexity of things, is the challenge that is what you love about what you do.
Yes. Yeah, challenge and learning in combination, right? Mm-hmm. And I have to say, it's one of my mantras, which is stretch yourself, because you will learn as you stretch yourself into new stuff. Mm-hmm. In all of my career, I would say, if I had to do the same project twice, I would be bored. And I've never really had to do the same project twice. There's always enough of a challenge and a difference in this particular implementation of a project or a customer engagement that makes it new, right? I mean, we were doing some stuff today to get ready for a client meeting, and I went straight to the end of year financial report and started digging through, reading the numbers, understanding the debt, and understanding where that company was, what had happened in the pandemic. And I would say early in my career, I would have shied away from that. But actually now I really wanted to fundamentally understand the business. But there's no better way than actually reading the financial report. As a technologist, go read the financial plan, understand the end of year results, try and work out how the business is operating. There's a lot you can do as you absorb that technique of truly understanding a business from their financial results. Similarly, the conversation I'm going to have with that client isn't a routine, Amazon or Azure cloud thing. It's more of a complex problem around maintenance and repair. So again, I was like, can you send me the latest proposal we've done? I don't know about that. I will immerse myself, fully read before I get ready for that call. And I love that. I mean, I even love not only preparing, but being challenged a little bit by the client in an area that I don't understand, because there's never any harm in saying I don't know. But what normally you'll find is, if you're prepared enough, you will know something enough to be relevant in that conversation.
Yeah. And I love that point you just made there about, you don't know. And something I think people are afraid to do is to say they don't know. And I think just recently I was talking about this, and the fact that from the time we're born, we're always learning. So we're always asking questions. Why does it have to change when we grow up?
Yes.
Why would we stop asking questions? And I think it comes into all that inner negative thought process we have about people are going to judge us or think we're stupid or we're not good enough because we don't know. But why, if we knew everything, then what is the point, right? We're there to learn and to grow, like you say. So I think that's really important, to be able to put yourself out there and just ask questions to learn.
Correct. And I think this is where, the more you tend to read, the more you realize how little you do know, and you become a little bit more comfortable dealing with the ambiguous, but saying, look, I've got enough experience in my career. I've done a lot of cool things and interesting projects that I have relevance in that conversation with a client, or with that particular project team, or that particular white paper that we're writing. I'm going to bring a little bit of what I do know, right? But be open to putting that out on the table with other people who will add content and value in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because again, it's about what you focus on, right? And you're focusing on what you do know and what value you have got to bring. Other people will have their value and their perspectives to bring. And also by sharing what you've got, there might be a different angle to that you might not have considered before. So by putting it out there and sharing it with people, you get to look at things in different ways, right?
Fully agree. And I think that's the nice thing about I've found in lockdown and with collaboration, is that you have no choice, right? If you're working on some of these complex problems, you're working with people who are all so virtual, and you can say, look, let's all contribute. I will just share what I know, and then you can add in. And some of our best sessions have been where people are contributing from diverse backgrounds. So that's the other thing I would say is, I've really found that if you surround yourself with like-minded people, you will end up with a biased or a one-sided view. But if you actually involve people from different backgrounds, from different skill sets, so, actually involving people with psychology backgrounds, or people who actually are not necessarily technologists, but have a finance background, and getting them involved in the conversation, you end up with a more a thoughtful and nuanced view of a particular topic, because people are bringing in diverse perspectives. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? No, didn't even think that would be relevant, but let's have a discussion about why that's appropriate.
Absolutely. Sometimes you can find I do it a lot. I make a statement of something that I think is glaringly obvious, and the response from the recipient is like, oh, I hadn't even considered that. Yeah. And it's just because, again, coming from different backgrounds, different points of view, that's where the great ideas happen, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah.
And so tell me then, when it comes to working with your clients, what is your approach to that?
So I think essentially I'm exploring with them a problem space, and I try and avoid any thinking about the solution until I fully understand the problem. And so there's two approaches, obviously, 2 ears, 1 mouth, listen when you speak initially in that, but also we use techniques like we have an innovation center in DXC, which is like a design studio, and sometimes actually getting people to think out loud and talk about the problem, with their own thinking of how to solve it. So one of the things we do is this postcard from the future, or step forward. If you solve this problem 2 years from now, what would the world look like? Now let's step back to where we are. How far have we got to go? I'd step forward, look back type approaches. And so a lot of these are not about the solution. They're about exploring the problem and how it will help. We ground ourselves typically in the KPIs or the outcomes. What is the metric that you would judge success by? And then once we've got that, then we're really trying to understand different solution options. If there's an obvious solution to this problem, then we would obviously talk to the client about this exists. It may not be something DXC has, it may be something we have with partners or even third parties. Occasionally though, and this is where I get involved, is there isn't an obvious answer, and there needs to be something developed, right? And to me, that's where I'm more or less not selling, but helping the customer progress forward by experimenting or doing a prototype and so on. And that's where I do think, probably 30 years ago, we would have talked about white papers and business investigation briefs, and we would have done a lot in paperwork. Today, it's a lot more practical. You want to build something and show something. The art of the possible. Can I demo something to you? Can I mock something up and imagine it was like this, right? And we use a lot of those techniques where the customer goes, yeah, you're fully understanding it. That's what it looks like. Then actually doing that in what we call a progressive way. Iterate, build something, let's try and use it and move forward. Now, I would say, if you're thinking about complex problems where there isn't an obvious answer, this is definitely the technique to follow. But if you're looking at a complicated problem where there are many answers, you just got to pick the right answer, then actually focusing on that problem to truly understand the many options and then helping the customer select is a valid way forward. There could be an obvious answer or a number of obvious answers. It's helping them select the right one. So don't always think we have to develop something from scratch. And I love, that critical thinking, that problem solving, getting the client to sort of truly think about it to the point at which they go, right now, for what we're trying to do, this answer is good enough. We'll go with that. Or no, none of these fit the bill. I don't think there is an answer. Maybe we shouldn't do this yet. Or if we're going to do it, let's do it in an experimental way. That whole engagement on problem solving, critical thinking, helping customers understand new and emerging technology and how it might be able to help, whether it's right for them and so on, is really the piece I just love doing. And, to that end, we've built this innovation center to enable that. It's not a center where we've got all of the answers worked out. It's actually a center where we can explore with the client what could be the answer.
Yeah. Nice. And so it is very much, it's not selling at all, is it? It's really working, like partnering alongside the clients to really, as you said at the start, to really understand the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think in my mind, and I hear this a lot, I actually hear this sentence a lot. Sukhi, what would you do if you were me? Right? And so I'm really trying to immerse myself in their problem from their perspective, less about me as somebody who works at DXC. And that's where you really have to have empathy for not only the problem, but the position they're in terms of what outcomes they need. They're behind the curve in solving this problem. Are they late? In which case they can't wait another year for a major program. They might need a tactical quick fix right now. That putting yourself in that position and being able to say, okay, if I was you, this is what I would do, right? And getting the customer going, that makes sense. And that sometimes could be not a DXC answer. It may be, look, we don't have the answer for you. You might want to go do this over here and buy this solution. It's actually fully available. I think that would give you the answer immediately. And what you do if you truly immerse yourself in the problem, put yourself in their shoes and give them the best advice.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. And which I like that approach, because it's not, you'll get people who will like sell and then talk. And you said at the start, it's about listening and really understanding. So there's a big difference there in terms of your approach.
It is a huge understanding. And this isn't just me, right? We're building, I have built a significant team and we're transitioning that team into a bigger group now where that's their purpose in life. Go work with the client to truly immerse yourself in their business problems, in their technology challenges, try and understand what they're trying to solve. When they have a problem, they will come to you because you've spent and invested the time in truly understanding their business and their challenges.
And that brings me nicely into my next kind of question here. And that's that, you're leading and directing the engagement of technologists with business leaders. And technologists kind of typically they're not client or front facing. So how is that working for you with your team? What challenges, if any, are you experiencing with that?
So Layla, this is the toughest part, right? Rarely do we have an issue in getting people technically skilled. They're normally engineers or architects who can do the certifications in cloud or in AI and so on. What I feel the technologists typically lack are the people skills. And when I say people skills, I mean things like the soft skills of communication. So when somebody asks you a question, I'll give you, this is year 2000. I'm working for somebody, a very senior leader within EDS at the time. And he asked me a question and I answered. And the coaching moment after the meeting, he took me out and he said, Sukhi, sometimes when I ask you the time, you explain to me how the watch was made when I just need to know the time. And I feel that, and that has stuck with me for 21 years, which is answer the question. Don't answer what you know about this technology or about this cool thing. Listen to the question and answer the question, and just enough to answer the question. Because if you answer and say this is the time, and then they go, okay, I was hoping you could elaborate a little bit more on how you worked out the time, then you can tell them the rest of it, right? So I would say that communication, those soft skills. The other piece I think some technologists lack are the consulting background, which is the follow through, which is when a customer asks you for something, follow through immediately. I know it sounds obvious, but why don't you write an email straight after the meeting and saying, I think we agreed this and this is what you asked me to do. People appreciate that. It sounds like boring, but technologists don't tend to do that. They go, yeah, I know what they asked. I'm getting on with it. No, write back and confirm, because if it isn't the right thing, you'll get an immediate response which says it's right or wrong. And then the customer would actually say, look, they truly understood what I asked for, because they put it in their own words and replayed it back to me, right? Basic things sometimes don't get done. And then I would say the ability to present succinctly an answer without 49 slides, right? and sometimes the best presentations don't involve any slides. Some of our best presentations is where we have prepared 10 slides but never got off slide one. They're sometimes the best discussions, because the customer says, look, can we just have a dialogue, right? I did this to a board, a supermarket chain in Holland, a board, and we prepared loads of content. When we actually got in the boardroom, the projector wasn't working in their boardroom. And the CEO at the time, Sir John Rishton, I think he was called, then moved on to Rolls-Royce, and he said, can we just not have a talk, right? And that was one of the best conversations, because we had a dialogue about the challenges and what we thought needed to be addressed. And so by all means, use the PowerPoint and the Word documents to prepare yourself. Get your content ready, but don't die in a ditch and think you have to read all of that content and present all that content. Be quite succinct and focused and respectful of the time of the client and so on. And the other thing I've seen so many times is people get to the 39 slide of 45 and never get to the action plan and the real topics that should have been discussed, right? Because they were too busy focused on the earlier stuff. So sometimes just pause, realize where you are, and get to the punchline on the topic you really want to discuss. So all of these are soft skills. You'd think these would be some of the obvious ones, but I got quite senior in my career. I got to a fellow level at EDS and HP before I went on any formal media training and any presentation type skills. And I think that's missing. I will tell you, I lived in California for 3 years, and my 5-year-old in kindergarten had to present he was in kindergarten and he had to present a talk. And we picked Galapagos tortoises, and I had to write the frame up, but he had to stand in front of his class at 5 years old and present. I can honestly tell you that I went through nearly all of my education to university and didn't have to present. It's a completely different thing in the UK than it is in the US. And I think in certain cultures, they really are trying to get kids much more confident and able to do that early. Whereas I would say I still am a bit of an introvert, and I was a reluctant presenter. Whereas I think in certain cultures, it's much more baked in to it's part of your education and it's what you need to do.
Yeah.
And so I think that whole piece for a technologist, my view, it's the soft skills. It's the presentation, communication, consulting-led development. The one thing I would add, though, and this is just of the last 4 or 5 years, Layla, that I think is really important, be data-driven. Anybody can present a point of view without facts and figures, but go get data, either third-party data or client data, and use the data to get insights and present that. That's so much more powerful. If you can say, look, I've taken your data, I've augmented it with this third-party data. This data tells me this. From this, I've deduced a recommendation, and I'm presenting you what I think you should do based on what the data is telling me. So much more powerful than just saying, no, we have a point of view, and our point of view is this. And if it's not backed up by facts and figures, then it can easily be challenged.
Yeah, definitely. And what about, you know, as someone who's a technologist, how easy is it to transition into explaining things in layman's terms? Because I think that is also something that could be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, so I think the one thing I've always done is my learning style is I learn and I present what I've learned, either try and write a blog or I write myself a white paper. So for me to understand, I try and write back my notes in a way that I can present to somebody else. And I really try and write those in a layman's terms. I probably overuse analogies just to make it easy for somebody to compare it to something that they would really understand. But just recently I presented to an Atlantic conference on IT modernization to business transformation. Sounds like quite a dry topic. But my first slide started with, right, what would this look like for a new starter leaving university and starting as a mechanical engineer for a firm? Let me talk to you about Alex, this hypothetical person, and imagine what would life be like for them. So I centered the conversation almost immediately on something that was relatable to everybody in the audience, which is a student leaving university and needing to become very productive in 2 weeks, right? So that is a sort of technique which says, you know, get quickly to some level of basic understanding with your audience. And then from there, you can build more complex topics, right? And that, I won't say I've sort of like built a technique, but I've just learned how to build a relationship with an audience on some layman's terms, some quite simple. And so I rarely talk about machine learning or deep learning or the data science and the algorithms involved. I bring it to life and say, look, natural language processing is like talking to Siri or to Google. So you as a consumer are already using machine learning models, you just don't realize it. Well, imagine we could use that same model to do this kind of thing. So you try and take it back to something they do understand, then build from there. And so that's the sort of layman's technique I always use, which is no matter how clever or difficult you think this topic is, go back to some level of common understanding with your audience or the person you're speaking to and build it logically from there in easy to understand language. Dumb it down so that everybody can understand what you're talking about. And by the way, most senior technologists or enterprise architects, they are the Babel fish, right? So they have to talk a geek language to the technologists, right? Because there are some people who will, in a large enterprise, will want to know the geeky stuff. They've got to speak in layman's terms to the senior leadership. They've got to speak in business terms to the finance people. So I do call the role I play in large organizations, it's a bit of a Babel fish. You've got to know the audience and answer the question in the context of what you think they will understand and be able to take from this. But that may mean that the same problem is described 3 different ways to 3 different audiences.
Yeah. And I missed that because I think the signal dropped a little bit. What was it you call that? What was the phrase?
The Babel fish.
Right, okay.
Right, so it's a biblical term, which is the Tower of Babel, where multiple languages. So think of a technologist speaking in layman's terms to the business leaders, but in financial language to the finance department, they're going to want to know return on investment, how much money you're looking for, what's the payback, and so on. And then to the technologists, you're probably going to have to say, I think you should use this algorithm, and this is the data set, but we don't have this right data. So the same problem can still be described to 3 different audiences, but you don't have to talk about the algorithm to the business leader, and you don't have to talk about the finances to the engineer, right? You just, as a technologist though, you've got to be able to do all 3 of those, I think, most of the time.
Yeah, and I love that, and the fact that you talked about the analogies. You know, in my training on how to ensure that things resonate with people, it's about, we call it a universal experience. And a lot of the time it's things like driving a car or something. There's something around travel or something you can use as an analogy to demonstrate the point. So I think it's really important to recognize that and bring in, as you say, analogies of things that people will generally be aware of come across or understand to make the point. And I think people fail to recognize something because, again, it's, as we go back to talking about different backgrounds, different experiences, your experience and my experience can become very, very different. So even though you're talking about something that you assume I would know about, if I've never had that experience before, it won't resonate, it won't land with me, and then I'll probably switch off because I've now lost where you're at or what your message is. And again, from a audience point of view, as you say, whether it's the tech geeks, it's the finance people, you know, you've got to be able to connect with them in a way that they understand you. That's really, really important.
Yeah.
And just coming, sort of leading on from that nicely, you talked about the relationships there as well, building those relationships. So tell me a little bit about that in terms of, you know, how you think, or what's the importance of that, would you say, when it comes to the kind of roles that we're exploring here?
Yeah, so definitely in the role I'm in, for instance, where senior technologist, CTO for Europe, Middle East, and Africa, that as a calling card allows me to speak to other CTOs, right? And then what happens, obviously, over your career, CTOs move from one business to another business. So those continuity of relationships, suppliers, for instance, somebody might have worked for VMware and now switched to somewhere else. So that network of contacts is really important to keep. And so something like LinkedIn, I'm not saying, you know, it's the only way, but that's a really powerful way of sort of keeping connected to the right people as they move around. What it allows me to do is, you know, somebody I might know at a particular supplier has just started a new job. It allows me, if I know that person, to be able to make a call and go, hey, I understand you moved. You know, would you entertain a conversation about what you're doing in your new role? Can I help? You know, is there any challenges that you're facing? So that allows, you know, the old Rolodex of old in a new digital way for you to continue with these relationships and help people through their career. So it's actually, you know, there will be people who are upwardly mobile and are moving fast through these organized various stages. That does demand, though, that you're also relevant in the context of what's happening in the market. So there is a fair bit of educating yourself and keeping up to speed with these kind of technologies and the latest sort of, not just trends, but the latest is from large technology companies and so on. So it's really important, in my mind, to maintain that network of contacts. Now, this is not just in my space. It's not just in customers and CTO types. It's in academia, maintaining some relationships. It's with analysts and media and so on. So that is really important that you're not just maintaining a technology-centric network, they're also maintaining a network across all of these elements. And I think, you know, it's taken me 30-some years, but I think if I ping somebody and say, let's have a conversation, they will reciprocate. And that's because at times I've done the same. When somebody calls me, I will spend time. And, you know, one of the things from a respect perspective is, I'll speak to anybody from the graduate who's come in to the CEO. I will give them equal time. I don't really differentiate. I don't. A CEO may not like that, but anybody who reaches out for some time, and that's because that graduate is probably going to be an SVP in 15 years' time in some large corporation, and will remember the fact that you mentored them through that, right? That CEO will start another company and will be the head of some other company and will want, to come back and talk to you. So it takes time. It's not a 9-to-5 job. A lot of the conversations I have outside my normal working time are not directly related to the job. It's building this network and maintaining it, understanding what's happened in people's lives and as they change, and actually having continuous conversations with them about what's happening in their life as well as what's happening in their career.
Yeah, and I agree with you. You talk about reciprocity, and I think it's a natural thing. You happy to help people, people will be happy to help you, at a time of need. And also you talk about a diverse network. And again, I think that's really important to recognize. I used to notice it when I was in my career, that oftentimes people around me that only mix with the people in their team. And working for such a huge organization, I always start conversations with people if I was going to grab a drink or coffee or something and someone else is there, and just find out what they do and where they work and how you build that network. But then you get different perspectives, different idea of what's going on for them, the way they see things that are happening in the organization or in the industry. So absolutely important, as you say, to have that diverse network around you, because it helps you to learn and grow, which is, again, what you mentioned earlier.
I would like Layla to mention one platform, and I'm not selling anything over the other, but Clubhouse is this latest phenomenon, where you can join and it's audio only and you're listening to topics. But on Saturday, I think I sat for 2 hours listening to Israelis and Palestinians talking to each other in Clubhouse. And this event had been running for several days with various moderators. And, aside from the conflict and the bipolar nature of it, to actually hear real people in Palestine or in Israel actually talking to each other about their different perspectives. And so what I love about Clubhouse is that it enables that kind of thing, but it also enables me to build a network. So you have to give a little bit. You have to be willing to go on stage and answer a few questions and talk about, and what in my bio, it does say, ex-EDS, ex-HP fellow, now fellow at DXC. And that has a brand element to it. So the number of people say, oh, we've got a HP fellow in the audience, let's get him up on stage and so on, right? And I'm going, gosh, I wish I hadn't even put that on my bio, because I'm just a normal guy who's had 30 some years of technology experience. And I'm going to tell you some of the stories, right? And the stories are what people find fascinating, right? And there's a lot of, this is new technology and we've never had it before. I'm going, sounds awfully like what we did 20 years ago in this project. Is it really new technology, or is it more modern technology but the same problem we've seen before? And so build of these kind of social media applications, LinkedIn, Twitter, Clubhouse, and so on, I think it's so much easier than probably 20 years ago, where you would have to know the right people. Now, actually, if you're willing to put the time in, you can get connected to some very, talented researchers, the best in their field, and you could be listening them to live on these kind of podcasts. That's the world we live in. It's really, the world's your oyster in terms of connecting to some very senior thought leaders on platforms today, and a lot of this stuff is for free.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I tend to spend most of my time on LinkedIn, and it's so easy. How we connected, I think, I can't remember what it was now, if it was a comment or a post you put out there, and then I thought that's interesting and started looking around and poking around and read your profile and thought, actually, it'd be great to have you on the podcast. But we've not worked together before. Our paths hadn't crossed, so it's an easy way to connect with people.
Absolutely, but it does mean the normal 9 to 5 thing doesn't really exist, right? You've got to invest in that as part of, well, you've got to do it as part of your day job. Let me not call it a 9 to 5. Part of your day job has to be investing in your network. That's probably the most important point I want to make, which is you have to invest in it. You have to contribute towards it. But when you need it, you can tap into that network, right?
Yeah. And it's, I think, also about not waiting until you need it, but recognizing, building those relationships, cultivating them in a situation so that you don't need them at this point, but actually having that network when you do need someone or you need advice or help or recommendation, you can then reach out to those people because you've already cultivated that relationship with them.
Correct.
And also, I think it's important to recognize it's not only the senior people, because you never know, as you said, that graduate that you give time to, where they're going to end up.
Indeed.
At some point, you might need their help, or you might,
Well, and again, it's not one way with the graduates. There's a lot of reverse mentoring that takes place as I mentor graduates. I learn as much from them as they learn from me, right? They do have a desire to move much more quickly, and I tend to say, do the current job really well, right? Focus on the current job really well. The next one will come. Don't worry about the next job, right? Because I never did, right? I never focused on the next move. I always focused on the current role, and then somebody would typically tap you on the shoulder and go, hey, listen, we've got another role. Would you be interested in this? So I've been very lucky, both in the kind of work I've got, but also in the opportunities that have come my way. And so that's, be in the present and focus on the current work and do that really well, as long as you're learning and you're not bored and so on, right? That's the most important thing to be doing right now. Do that well.
Yeah, totally. And so tell me, you talk earlier about how you study technology. So how do you keep yourself current and relevant for your clients and for the people in your team?
I read a lot, right? So one of the things I've done is, Twitter can be a bit of a cesspit of a platform. And so I tend not to be too controversial. But what I do is I've curated a list of people I follow. And if they push an article out, I read it. And I click on the Medium document or the article and I read it in full. So I read a lot. Read a lot of current technology. I use Clubhouse. So for instance, shout out to a couple of the clubs like Tech News. Every morning I listen to Tech News on Clubhouse, and it's a group of people from all over the world talking about breaking news in technology. Then I study, right? So I'm, for instance, when I did data science, and it was neural networks in my day, it was 30 years ago, right? Over 30 years ago. So I feel a lot has changed in technology, access to data sets and algorithms in the cloud, but I'm not up to speed. And that's because I'm not hands dirty doing project work. So I've signed on as an apprentice for a data fellowship course. And I'm actually, 20% of my week is taken up by doing coursework and assignments and teaching myself stuff that I don't truly understand. So, in a month's time, I think I'm going to be learning Python programming. And I am a programmer. I would say if you boil me down, to core skills, it's enterprise architecture and software engineer as a programmer and self-taught. But I've never done Python. But I'm looking forward to actually learning that in a class setting with peers of ours and actually solving a real problem. So it's a fairly time-consuming effort to keep up to speed and learn things. But I find it interesting. I mean, if the day gets boring, I will go do something else, and it's not boring at the moment. So I read a lot and I do some formal training to keep up to speed. And then the point I made earlier on to you is, for instance, even though I'm doing this course on algorithms and data science, I've quite an interest in things like bias in algorithms and ethics and bias. And so I will listen to talks, and then what I do is I try and write a white paper on the back of that so I can teach other people what I learn. And that forces me to truly, I learn by teaching, right? So I learn it, then try and translate into something I can give to somebody else and I can present. And that then opens up topics, opens up opportunities saying, hey, listen, we've got an opportunity for somebody to speak at this event around ethics in AI. Since you just recently published this paper, would you be willing to do that? So it's not a planned thing, but it leads to those opportunities. If you invest the time, learn stuff, replay it, teach others, you'll get opportunities, right? And so that's where I find myself. There's a whole bunch of stuff I'm not good at, right? And I'm not an expert in. I try not to overcommit to topics where I just don't, if I don't understand it, I will say no. And I'll say, that's not me. But normally I'm connected enough to say, there's a better speaker, or there's somebody who is really good at this topic. Really, you should ask them to speak, right? But I'll come along anyway because I will learn. So having a network of these subject matter experts that I know really does help me, because if I don't know the topic, I will know somebody who does. That's one of the things I think a lot of people come to me. They're saying, look, you might not know the answer, but we know you will know someone who does, right? And again, that's an investment in my network, in the subject matter experts, in also reaching out to them and saying, hey, listen, where are you with that latest piece of work? Can I connect the dots? Yeah. So I that's one thing. I would say I am a connect the dots person in a large enterprise. And so people come to me, not directly, as I say, for the answer, but because I'll either know the answer or because I'll know someone who does.
Yeah. And that just shows the power of a network, isn't it?
Yes. And the connector part of the network, right? And that, I've forgotten the author, New York Times bestseller. Can't believe I've forgotten his name now. But one of his books is about the connectors in an organization.
Right.
That is, I would say I'd describe myself as a connector in DXE and in, the technology fields I'm part of. I tend to be a connector of those people.
Amazing. And I like the point you mentioned there as well about you learn something and then you create that white paper so you can potentially go and teach it as well. And that's the best way of learning, is to teach it.
It is. The best way of learning is to teach, right? And because it forces you to learn it in a way that you can explain it to somebody else. That's the main thing. Explain it to somebody else. Whether you're teaching them or not, it doesn't matter, but be able to explain it. And typically that means, in my language, dumbing it down. And I don't mean making it dumb, but dumbing it down so you can describe it in simple language so that anybody can understand it.
Yeah.
And that is, I would say, a technique that in my family, several of my family have got multiple degrees, and my brother's a PhD, and I keep saying, my PhD is in common sense. And it's because I tend to break it down to a level where anybody can understand it, and you can build empathy with that person and what their perspective is, and from there build up, right? And so tackling complex problems, into breaking them down into smaller problems, and then explaining them in layman's terms so anybody can contribute to this wider cause is I guess it's quite a skill, but it's something I've had to do on very large programs. Nobody can understand everything. One of the things I was taught earlier on, is probably, the design of an aircraft. There's probably only about 5 people who understand everything, right? And what those 5 people do is they break it into pieces so that people understand their bit, right? Different people are skilled in their pieces, but not everybody understands the totality. But there are a few people in the center, very few, who understand the whole thing. And breaking those problems down is a way to solve those complex problems.
Yeah, most definitely. Sukhi, it has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. Have you got any words of wisdom that you'd like to leave our audience with?
Just the points I think we've already made, which is, be a lifelong learner, build the network beyond, the work side. If you're passionate about a topic, really learn it and present it back in the layman's terms to other people, be able to explain it and so on. And then, from a technologist speaking, soft skills, communication skills, people skills matter. You could be the best technologist, but if you can't deal with people, you're going to struggle.
Yeah. Thank you, Sukhi. It's been an absolute pleasure having you.
Thank you very much, Layla. Really appreciate it.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, then please do subscribe to the show so you don't miss any future episodes. And remember to leave a review telling us about your key learnings and what you enjoyed the most. And do share this podcast with your friends and colleagues so we can spread the word on the importance of personal branding when it comes to your career advancement. And also ensure that others can benefit from these invaluable insights from many inspirational leaders. I will be eternally grateful. And if you are looking to earn more money, to get promoted, to secure your next role and advance your career, and would like me to support you personally on that journey to get you there, then reach out to me and let's arrange a chat. Alternatively, why don't you check out my personal branding launchpad, a group training and mentoring program. Finally, if you'd like to connect with me directly, then do reach out and direct message me on LinkedIn. You can find the link as well as any other resources mentioned in the show notes. I'll see you next time.